The thing about eyes in the dark is that your brain recognizes them before you do. Before your conscious mind can form the thought, something is watching me, your amygdala has already fired. Your adrenal glands are already dumping cortisol. Your heart rate has already spiked. By the time you think, wait, what was that? Your body has been afraid for 3 full seconds. Scientists call it the predator detection system. It's ancient. Older than language, older than fire. And the reason it evolved so precisely is because for most of human history, the things watching you from the darkness wanted to eat you. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something before I begin. What happened to me in the Kinabatangan forest in Malaysian Borneo in March of 2019 was not a ghost story. I don't believe in ghosts. I'm a wildlife research assistant with a biology degree, a healthy respect for the scientific method, and absolutely no tolerance for mystical nonsense. Which is exactly why what I found at the end of those 3 days still keeps me awake sometimes. Not every night, but sometimes. Let me set the scene properly, because the geography matters. The Kinabatangan River in Sabah, the eastern shoulder of Borneo, is one of the last places on Earth where you can still find orangutans, pygmy elephants, proboscis monkeys, and clouded leopards, all sharing the same stretch of riverine forest. It's also extraordinarily remote. The kind of remote that people from cities genuinely cannot comprehend until they're in it. The nearest small town, Sukau, is a cluster of maybe 200 people connected to the outside world by a single road that becomes impassable during heavy rain. Cellular service exists in patches, 1 bar here, gone the next moment. The forest itself runs for hundreds of kilometers in every direction, broken only by the river and the occasional palm oil plantation carved violently into its edges. I was there as a research assistant for Dr. Priya Nair, a wildlife ecologist from the University of Malaya who had been studying proboscis monkey movement patterns for 6 years. Proboscis monkeys are extraordinary, strange-looking creatures. The males have enormous pendulous noses that amplify their honking calls, and they live almost exclusively along riverbanks, retreating into the forest at dusk to sleep. Priya's research involved tracking their sleeping roosts, understanding how they chose them, and monitoring whether habitat fragmentation was forcing them into smaller, more dangerous territories. My job was simple in theory. During a 3-day solo stretch, while Priya returned to Kota Kinabalu for a conference, I would man the research station, complete the dawn and dusk observation counts at 3 fixed points along the river, and maintain the camera trap network, 23 cameras positioned at intervals throughout a 4-kilometer section of forest. I'd done solo fieldwork before, 3 weeks in Sarawak the previous year, a month in the Danam Valley. I was comfortable in tropical forest. I understood its rhythms. I was not the kind of person who spooked easily. The station itself was a raised wooden structure on the riverbank. 2 sleeping rooms, a small lab area, a covered observation deck, solar panels, a 2-way radio for emergencies, and a chest freezer full of food. A local field assistant named Razie lived in the village 40 minutes downriver and checked in every other day. He'd come the day before I arrived, would come again on day 2, and then Priya would return on day 4. I arrived on a Sunday afternoon. Razie showed me everything, ran through the protocols, pointed out where the leach socks were kept, reminded me 3 times to check the generator fuel level before dark, and then climbed into his boat and disappeared around the river bend. I stood on the deck and listened to the engine fade, and then there was just the forest, the river, the sound of something moving through the canopy 50 meters away, invisible. I was completely alone. I loved it. The first day was perfect. I completed the dusk count, 17 individual proboscis monkeys settling into their roost trees along a 400-meter section of river, and ate a simple dinner of rice and canned sardines while watching a family of long-tailed macaques pick through the low vegetation on the opposite bank. I wrote up my notes by headlamp, checked the generator, and was asleep by 9:30. The forest at night has a texture to it that I've never heard adequately described. It's not silence. It's an ocean of sound. Frogs, insects, the occasional crash of something large moving through undergrowth. But it has a consistency to it, a baseline, and after a few nights in the field, Your sleeping brain learns to monitor that baseline the way a parent monitors a baby monitor. You stop hearing the normal sounds. You only wake when something breaks the pattern. I slept well. No interruptions. Hello, and thank you for being here. We want you to know that Bone-Chilling Nightmare is completely free from ads. No interruptions, no distractions, just pure immersive storytelling. But creating these experiences comes at a cost. Every video is built from hours of research, writing, and production, all done with care to bring you stories that truly stay with you. Without ad revenue, the channel depends entirely on the support of viewers like you. If our stories have ever captured your imagination or given you that unforgettable chill, we invite you to support us. Whether it's $3 or $500, your contribution directly helps us continue creating and growing this community. Don't just watch from the shadows. Be part of what keeps Bone-Chilling Nightmare alive. Thank you so much for checking out the link in the video description below to support and keep this creepy community thriving. Thank you again for your support. Monday morning was routine. Dawn count at 5:15. The monkeys were already moving, feeding along the riverbank, their honking calls carrying across the water in the cool air. I checked camera traps 1 through 8, replaced 3 batteries, and was back at the station by 11. That afternoon, I checked traps 9 through 17. Trap 16 was the one that first made me pause. It was positioned at the base of a large strangler fig, about 180 meters from the river, angled to capture animal crossings on a narrow game trail that ran between 2 sections of denser forest. It had been placed there specifically because Priya had documented a clouded leopard using that trail on 2 separate occasions in the previous year. The camera had a motion sensor and an infrared flash, and it stored images on an SD card. I pulled the card, slipped it into my field tablet, and scrolled through. Mostly what you get on camera traps is empty frames. False triggers from wind-moved branches, from falling leaves. Then you get the small stuff. Rats, civets, the occasional bird. You learn to scroll quickly, pausing only when you see something worth noting. I was scrolling quickly when I stopped. The timestamp was 2:47 a.m. Monday morning, just a few hours earlier. The image showed the game trail clearly, the broad base of the strangler fig in the background, the narrow corridor of flattened vegetation, the rich red-brown of the infrared flash giving everything that particular Mars surface quality. Standing on the trail was a person, or rather a figure, upright, roughly human-shaped. But the infrared flash had given me only 1 frame, because whatever it was had not triggered additional frames. Camera traps work on motion detection. If the figure had walked into frame and then continued walking, I'd have multiple images. Instead, there was 1, which meant it had walked into the detection zone and stopped. Stood still long enough for the camera to capture a single frame, and then, what? Moved back the way it came? Stood there until the sensor reset? I enlarged the image. The figure was at the far edge of the frame, partially obscured by a curtain of aerial roots hanging from the fig. I could make out a torso, 2 arms, a head. The posture was odd. Not the posture of someone walking, not the posture of someone startled by the camera flash. It looked deliberate, arranged, the way someone stands when they're looking at something. I stared at it for a long time. My rational mind ran through the explanations quickly. Poachers occasionally moved through the forest at night. This stretch of the Kinabatangan had problems with illegal hunting, and Razie had mentioned once that night hunters sometimes used the game trails to avoid detection. That was the obvious explanation. A poacher who'd spotted the camera, stopped, reconsidered his route. Made sense. I noted it in my field log, possible human presence, trap 16, 0247, and moved on to check traps 18 through 23. Trap 18 showed nothing unusual. Trap 19 showed nothing unusual. Trap 20 was positioned at the top of a small ridge about 300 meters deeper into the forest, a good 20 minutes of walking from the river. It had been placed to monitor a salt lick, a natural mineral seep that attracted deer, bearded pigs, and occasionally larger mammals. I pulled the card. The same figure, same upright posture, same deliberate stillness. Timestamp 3:14 a.m. Monday morning. I did the math. Trap 16 to trap 20. The direct path between them was about 350 meters through dense forest at night. 27 minutes. That was possible. Hurried, but possible for someone who knew the terrain. But the posture again, not moving through, standing, facing the camera. I sat on the ridge for a while, looking at the image on my tablet. The salt lick was empty behind the figure. The ironwood trees rose on either side. The infrared light had washed the scene into that red-tinged monochrome, and in that light the figure had no real features I could resolve, just the suggestion of a head, the shadow pools where eyes might be. I told myself, poacher. Poacher who knows where the cameras are, maybe watching to see if the research station is actively staffed. I packed up my equipment and walked back to the river. That night, I locked the station door and slept with the two-way radio next to my head. Tuesday, day 2. Razie arrived at 8 in the morning, and I showed him the images immediately. He studied them on my tablet for a long time, longer than I expected, his face doing something complicated. "You know who this might be?" I asked. He handed the tablet back. "Can I see the camera placement, the map?" I showed him on my field map where traps 16 and 20 were positioned. He traced the distance between them with his fingertip. "This is far from any village path," he said finally. "No reason for someone to be here at this time." "Poacher?" He rocked his head slightly. Not quite a nod, not a denial either. "Maybe." He looked at the river. "But usually they move. They don't stop like this." He turned the tablet back to face him and looked at the image again. "They don't look at the camera." We spent the morning checking the perimeter of the research station together. No sign of disturbance, no footprints in the mud near the water's edge, nothing obviously tampered with. Razie reset one of the station's motion sensor lights, which had been malfunctioning, and I felt considerably less anxious with him there, moving around, filling the space with the practical noise of someone who understood this forest the way I didn't. Before he left at noon, he paused in the boat. "Call on the radio tonight if anything," he said. "Anything." Of course. He looked at me in a way that made me feel like the second word had been emphasized for a reason. I watched his boat go. The river swallowed the sound. That afternoon I sat on the observation deck and made a decision. I was going back to check traps 16 and 20. Not because I wasn't a little unsettled, I was, but because my job required it, and more than that, because I genuinely believed that if there was something explainable happening, the camera trap data would tell me what it was. Science over anxiety, evidence over feeling. I left at 2:30, giving myself plenty of time to be back before dark. The walk to trap 16 took about 20 minutes through standard lowland forest. Dense understory, the canopy 60 or 70 feet above, shafts of afternoon light coming through in coins and columns that shifted as the canopy moved in the wind. I could hear hornbills somewhere overhead. The air smelled of decomposing leaves and something sweet I couldn't identify. The strangler fig came into view. The camera was exactly where it should be, strapped to a secondary trunk, its motion sensor eye pointed down the game trail. I pulled the card. One image. Timestamp 4:22 a.m. Tuesday morning. The figure again. Same position, same posture, but this time it was closer to the camera, not at the edge of the frame, near the center. I stood in the forest and stared at my tablet for a long time. The figure was close enough now that I could see more detail. Still no features I could resolve into a face. The infrared light doesn't work that way. It washes and flattens. But I could see that the figure appeared to be wearing something dark, something with no reflective quality, and that the posture was not the posture of someone who was cold or cautious or trying to make themselves small. It was the posture of someone utterly comfortable, occupying space, standing the way you stand in your own home. I noticed something else. The shadows around the figure's head were unusual. I couldn't tell if it was an artifact of the infrared flash, or the angle, or some quality of the surrounding vegetation, but there appeared to be a slight lightness at the level of the face, as if the eyes were open, as if they were catching light. My rational mind said, infrared eye shine. Animals' eyes reflect IR light dramatically. Humans' eyes reflect it somewhat. Could be an artifact, could be lens flare. I put the tablet in my pack and kept moving toward trap 20. The ridge was 20 minutes deeper in. The forest changed quality as I climbed, denser, darker, the understory giving way to a carpet of bare roots and deep leaf litter. I was sweating through my shirt, the hornbills had gone quiet. I reached trap 20. I pulled the card. My hands were steady. I was proud of that. The image loaded, one frame. Timestamp 4:51 a.m. The figure was directly in front of the camera, 2 or 3 meters away at most. Centered, unmoving. And this time I could see the face. Not clearly. The infrared had done what infrared does, had burned out details, had created a face of shadows and catches of light. But I could see the general shape. I could see where the eyes were. They were open. They were looking directly into the lens. I've spent a lot of time since that moment trying to reconstruct my emotional state because I find emotional states interesting from a clinical perspective, and because I'm the kind of person who processes fear by converting it into analysis. What I can tell you is this: I did not panic. I did not run. What I felt was closer to the sensation of stepping off a curb you didn't know was there. A sudden lurch, a recalibration of where the ground was. Because there was something else in that image that I hadn't noticed in the others, and that I still cannot explain to my satisfaction. The figure's eyes were catching the infrared light. Human eyes catch infrared light, yes. There's a mild reflection. The tapetum lucidum is less developed in humans than in nocturnal animals, but it's present, and under strong IR illumination you can see it. It appears faintly, softly. It looks almost like a smear of pale light. These eyes didn't look like that. These eyes were bright. Bright the way a cat's eyes are bright, or a deer's eyes. A sharp, clear, bilateral light return. The kind that requires a well-developed tapetum lucidum. The kind that humans don't have. I walked back to the research station in 34 minutes. I know because I checked my watch when I left the ridge, and checked it again when I stepped onto the deck. 34 minutes for a walk that had taken me 45 minutes in the other direction, through the same terrain. I don't remember moving quickly. I don't remember making a decision to move quickly. My body simply moved faster than my mind authorized. I sat on the deck with the radio in my lap and thought carefully. Okay, what do I actually have? 3 photographs of a figure in the forest at night. A figure that was each time standing still and facing the camera. A figure that appeared to be moving closer to the camera over successive nights. A figure whose eyes in the most recent photograph had an unusual IR reflectivity. Explanations in order of likelihood. Someone was deliberately moving through the forest at night, monitoring the camera trap locations, which would require them to know where the cameras were. The eye shine could be explained by a strong IR flash hitting an unusual angle of the subject's eyes, or by contact lenses, or by some optical illusion of the infrared flattening and amplifying the orbital region in a way that mimicked tapetal reflection. Alternatively, someone had previously obtained images from these cameras, either by accessing Priya's research data or by physically accessing the camera cards, and was using that knowledge. Alternatively, and my rational mind relegated this to the bottom of the list with the appropriate degree of scientific skepticism, the figure in the photographs was not fully human. I held that thought for exactly as long as it took me to label it as non-useful and set it aside. I called Razie on the radio. No answer. I tried twice more over the next hour. The radio worked fine. I could hear the carrier, the static, the occasional burst of distant Bahasa on another channel. He simply wasn't responding. I ate dinner, checked the generator, turned the station lights on earlier than I needed to. The forest outside was doing its usual thing. It's layered, breathing, inhabited dark. The river moved past, black and continuous. A fish jumped somewhere. A flying fox wheeled over the canopy, visible for a moment against the last pale strip of sky. I told myself, tomorrow Priya returns. Tomorrow you show her the photographs and she contacts the park authority, and they send rangers to investigate. Tomorrow, this becomes someone else's problem. I went to bed at 9 o'clock. I set my watch alarm for 4 a.m. so I could do the dawn observation count. I lay in the dark and listened to the forest. At some point before midnight, I think around 11, though I wasn't checking my watch, the forest went quiet. Not completely quiet. That never happens. But the frog chorus dropped. The insect sound thinned. The background ocean of small sounds receded in a way I'd never experienced in 3 years of fieldwork. I was awake instantly. I lay still and listened. The forest remained muted. Not dead. I could still hear individual sounds, isolated and sharp, but the overall texture had changed, thinned, the way a crowd goes quiet when something walks into a room. I reached for my headlamp, didn't turn it on. I listened for footsteps on the wooden steps that led up to the station entrance. Listened for the sound of the door being tested, or the creak of the deck boards. Nothing. Nothing but that attenuated quiet. I lay there for a long time, and then, very slowly, the forest sound returned. The frogs came back first, tentative, then full-throated. The insects filled back in. The canopy began its nighttime conversation. I turned on my headlamp. I was drenched in sweat. I sat up and opened my field notebook and wrote, 11-ish p.m. Sudden drop in acoustic activity, lasting approx 8 to 10 minutes. No apparent cause. Forest resumed normal afterward. Note for Priya. I wrote it down because writing things down makes them data. Data is manageable. Data is the opposite of fear. I went back to sleep. At 4 a.m. my alarm went off. I made coffee on the camp stove, pulled on my boots, picked up my observation binoculars, and walked out onto the deck in the pre-dawn dark. I looked at the river, then I looked at the edge of the forest, 15 meters from the station. There were 2 points of light in the trees. They were at roughly human head height. They were separated by roughly the distance of a human face. And they were bright, brightly reflective, the way a cat's eyes are bright when light hits them, catching the glow of the station's solar lamp. I stood on the deck and looked at them. They looked back. They did not blink. I don't know how long I stood there. It might have been 30 seconds. It might have been 3 minutes. My body had entered a state of complete neurological override. The ancient system that my amygdala had been running since before I had a cortex was entirely in charge, and what it was telling me to do was be still, be very still, do not run, running triggers pursuit. Then they were gone, not gradually, not with a rustle of movement or the snap of a branch. One moment they were there. The next moment the darkness where they'd been was simply darkness. I went back inside. I sat at the field table with the radio and called Razie continuously for 40 minutes. On the 18th try he answered. "Are you all right?" he said before I could speak. His voice was careful, calibrated. "I saw something," I said. "At the tree line, eye shine, like an animal, but at human height, standing upright." There was a pause. "I'm coming," he said. He arrived in an hour, which meant he'd left before dawn, which meant he'd been awake, which meant he'd been expecting my call. When he came up the steps and I met him at the door, I showed him the photographs, the progression, the final image, the eye shine. He looked at them for a long time. "You've seen this before," I said. Not a question. He put the tablet down on the table. 3 years ago, he said, before Dr. Priya's research. Different researcher, German man doing bird surveys. He looked at the river. He also had camera trap images. Similar. He paused. He was fine. He left and he was fine. "What was it?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something in Malay I didn't fully catch, and then he said, "There are things in this forest that have been here longer than the forest itself. That's what the old people say." "That's not an answer," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "No," he agreed, "it isn't." Priya arrived that afternoon. I showed her everything. She was meticulous about it. Went through all 3 images with the magnification tool, noted the timestamps, noted the relative distances to the camera, spent a long time on the eye shine in the final image. She's a scientist, a rigorous one. I watched her brain work through the same list of explanations mine had worked through. She sent the images to a colleague at the University of Edinburgh who specializes in primate vision and IR photography. His response came 10 days later. He confirmed that the eye shine was inconsistent with normal human reflectivity under those conditions, that it more closely matched tapetal luminescence as seen in certain nocturnal primates, but that he could not identify the source. He noted that the image quality and focal length made it impossible to draw firm conclusions. We submitted a report to the Sabah Wildlife Department. They said they would look into reports of unauthorized human presence in the research area. We never heard back. Priya went on to publish her proboscis monkey research, which was excellent and important. The camera trap images from those 3 nights appeared nowhere in the publication. She kept them in a separate folder. I know because she told me. Here's what I've come to think about it. Not what I believe, exactly. Belief is a strong word, and I'm careful with strong words. What I've come to think. The Kinabatangan forest contains approximately 48 species of mammals that science has formally documented. But Borneo's forest is one of the oldest continuous ecosystems on Earth. Some of its deepest interior hasn't been comprehensively surveyed in 50 years. We know this. We know that the saola, a large bovid found in the Annamite Mountains of Vietnam, wasn't documented by Western science until 1992. We know that new mammal species are still being formally described every few years. We know that large, behaviorally sophisticated animals can evade systematic survey for decades. We also know something about intelligence, about the specific behaviors that indicate it: avoiding detection, monitoring threats, approaching incrementally, establishing whether a location is actively inhabited before making contact. Every night for 3 nights, something came closer to the cameras. By the 3rd night, it was close enough to look directly into the lens. And here is the thing that I return to, the thing I wrote in the margin of my field notebook in small handwriting that I've never shared with anyone until now. Whatever was in those images wasn't afraid of the camera, wasn't startled by the IR flash, wasn't passing through accidentally. It knew the cameras were there. It chose each night to close the distance, and on the last night it left the cameras behind and came to the station itself, and stood at the tree line, and waited, not to threaten, not to attack. Nothing happened to me. Nothing happened to the station. It stood at the tree line, and it looked at me. The way you look at something you're trying to understand, the way you look at something when you're deciding what it is. I've thought a great deal about which one of us was the research subject. I still don't have a satisfying answer. I'm not sure I want one. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. I truly appreciate your time and presence, and thank you for your support and contributions. It means more than you know and helps keep Bone-Chilling Nightmare alive and growing. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next story.